What was the justification for the involvement with the Taliban?
No, with the Taliban there wasn't that much of involvement. It was basically Pakistani request. Number two, the prince put it that way that we needed to have contact with the one in charge. No, with the Taliban there wasn't that much of involvement. It was basically Pakistani request. Number two, the prince put it that way that we needed to have contact with the one in charge in Afghanistan, and it was the Taliban. And he said that, and it's a very strong point, that it took us almost a year to recognize them after the capture of Kabul. They entered Kabul in '96, and so they really did not recognize them till a year later, after the fall of Mazar-e-Sharif, and they were in control of almost 90% of the country at that time. The kingdom also was hopeful that it could use its good offices to reconcile fighting parties in Afghanistan, to neutralize or to encourage the Taliban to be more moderate. In fact, I heard that from Prince Turki in Oxford. We were attending a conference together about 4 or 5 years ago, and I asked him about that, and that was one of his points. That was before our relation with the Taliban went sour.
Why did the relations go sour?
Oh, there is number one is Bin Laden, because if Saudi Arabia recognized the Taliban, then Taliban should be, as the representative government of Afghanistan, then it should be responsible, and responsible countries do not harbor someone else's, not opposition. He was more than opposition. He called for the overthrow of the government here. This is number one. Things went sour also because Saudi Arabia attempted many times to reconcile relation between the Taliban and other forces in Afghanistan, and it was fruitless. And Saudi Arabia blamed the Taliban for it. So it was those two things.
But weren't Saudi Arabia and the Americans, Unicol, various oil companies, they were dealing with the Taliban, putting money up front for the gas pipeline arrangements?
The Americans were involved in that. The Americans were involved. They were doing a lot of work with the Taliban. They even invited Taliban's fighters to Houston. We are not sure whether that support was translated in the form of money or it was just a promise to support the Taliban, because they wanted that.
When was this?
That was in 1998, around that time, 97. So the Americans were involved. Saudis were not involved in this, except there was a small Saudi company which was doing business. I think it was called Delta or something. It was exploring the situation. The ones who were really involved were the Pakistanis. The prince assured me that we in Saudi Arabia did not pay the Taliban a single penny.
When you say Pakistan was involved, to what extent?
Oh, the Pakistanis, they made no secrets. They were involved. They were involved even militarily. And I wrote an article the other day. I said that when the Pakistanis are upset at President Rabbani siding with India, I said that Rabbani, when he left Kabul as a political refugee, in 1973, he did not go to India. He went to Pakistan, to Peshawar, in the time of Mr. Bhutto, the late Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. And he only sided with India or asked for support from India when he began to hear Pakistani officers directing fires against his positions. I mean, it is the Pakistani making. They are the one who made Rabbani and the Northern Alliance against Pakistan when they come out in total support of the Taliban. So they made a big blunder, a big mistake, and all the way down to Pakistan, to a port somewhere near Jawadir port in the Arabian Sea. It was a very feasible project. You see, that area is rich of oil and gas.
Why not to India?
India is so distant. It is distant. I mean, India will be involved, will take fruit of that pipeline from Jawadir to India, it could turn out that way. But to go to India, it's too costly. You get the Himalayas, you get the Kashmir, and you know how the situation in Kashmir. The other route is Iran, but the Americans don't want anything involved Iran. The third route is through the Caucasus, and that area is also and Turkey. That area is geographically difficult and politically difficult with the Chechnyan problem.
How come that on all the oil routes there is one such problem, right? The Chechen problem there?
Yes. Yes, it is so. It is geographical problem and political problem. Iran is geographically speaking, Iran is a good outlet, but because of the political problems between Iran and America, it did not turn out well. Or maybe now you see relations now are easing up between Iran.
If Iran and America had made up and were friends, then you think American interest in Afghanistan would be minimized?
I think there was no American interest in Afghanistan. I mean, we should remember that in 1989, the Americans achieved their goal. They destroyed the Soviet Union, and they just walked out of the door and left the Afghans fighting against each other. The Americans, before the 11th of September, began to lose interest in the whole world, not only in Afghanistan. But Afghanistan, it was an area where they lost interest completely. Since the Russian withdrawal in '89. So I do not really buy the arguments of many people who say that the Americans want to have a base in Afghanistan. They don't need bases. No, the world does not run with those military bases. The bases the Americans have are Microsoft outlets, Kentucky Fried Chickens, oil companies. Those are the Americans' armada right now.
Tell me that what was your experience with the Taliban, your personal experience?
No, I had no experience with them, and I never liked them from the beginning.
But you have worked in that area.
I covered the Afghan war, the Afghan Mujahideen against the Soviet, the Arabs against the Russians. That the time I worked in Afghanistan up to 1993.
Were you then aware of the fact that many people from there were also being trained and being recruited and going and striking in Kashmir?
No, we should put, okay, Kashmir is a different story. But the Arab involvement in Afghanistan, it has two phases. The era before 1992, that was a very positive, it was very politically correct. Everybody was approving of such involvement. We in Saudi Arabia, the Americans, I'm sure if Osama bin Laden got a good public relations firm, or even maybe without that, he would have visited Reagan in the 1980s and check hand with him. It was politically correct, the role of the Arabs in Afghanistan at that time. They were doing exactly the job the Americans want them to do: fight the Russians, cripple the Soviet army. After after 92, there was no purpose of the Arabs to stay in Afghanistan because they were Afghans against Afghans, and according to us as Muslims, this is fitna, and it is forbidden to participate in a fitna. They have nothing. They are Arabs. They have nothing to do with that. They are no Tajik. They are no Pashtun. So why should they stay there? Most of them left. Except the ones who have no country to go to because they have political problems in their countries. But for example, the Saudi Arabians, all of them came back to Saudi Arabia, and they are doing their routine work, their routine jobs. They went back to their jobs, respected, with no harassments, with no problem whatsoever. We go to the area to the time of 1996. Osama bin Laden back to Afghanistan. Then a new recruitment started with a new goal, probably to fight the Americans, to train young Arabs to fight in Chechnya, this and that. That wasn't really appreciated. It wasn't appreciated. It was frowned at. It wasn't accepted. Even here in Saudi Arabia, the government did not allow it. It was an underground work, clandestine work, compared to the work of 1982. 1988, 1987, that time, that was an open. It was an open thing. You live to Islamabad airport proudly as an Arab fighting the Mujahideen. But 96 and on, it was a clandestine work.
Now, were you, when you were there, aware of the fact that some of these Arabs and some of the motivated Muslims and the Islamicists, motivated primarily against the Soviet Union,
Yes.
were also being used in Kashmir?
Yes. Kashmir, there were Kashmiris in Afghanistan, even in the 80s. You see, Kashmir, to us in the Arab world, to many Muslims, is just cause. It is Muslims under occupation against their will. And it should be seen that way. Either you take it to the UN, you take it to any world body and solve the problem. We should be civilized about that. Just like the Czech and the Slav, when they wanted to break away, they saw the census of the people. It is not haram. It is not against the rules of nation.
That is, I agree with you. But the point is that the Pakistanis were sending out, Pakistani territory was used by some of these people for terrorism against the part of Kashmir which is in India.
It was an open secret that Pakistanis, of course, they would not say terrorism. It was liberation to them. They were allowing people, Kashmiris, to be trained in Afghanistan or in Pakistan to go in India and start a campaign of jihad similar to what they experienced against the Russians in the Soviet Union. Probably they were encouraged by the success they had in Afghanistan.
Did you see any such thing? Did you meet people who were such motivated?
Yes, I saw Kashmiris in Afghanistan.
And you met them and they
Yes,
were motivated?
they were motivated.
What groups were they?
Oh, they were a small group. They were a small group. They were in the camp of Osama bin Laden. Yeah, they were Kashmiris. It's no secret.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, Osama bin Laden, all these people are now being sought by the Americans. They have given a list. They say these accounts have to be frozen.
Mm-hmm.
These people, we want all these heads on a platter. What do you think will the Saudi regime do?
The Saudi government announced its total cooperation with all investigations which would lead to the perpetrator of the horrible attack of the 11th of September, and they have been doing that. But in the same time, we cannot take 2 or 3 lines sent to us by the Americans to say this person is funding terrorists and freeze his accounts. They must send evidence, and the Americans are not doing that. Even allies of the Americans cannot tolerate this attitude by the Americans. We understand their suffering, their problems. The British court rejected, accepted the case of one Saudi businessman Al-Qadi. I heard the French are also reluctant to accept those American rulings. For example, the Americans decided that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. The world is not willing to accept that. Because the world also has other interests other than the Americans' interests. And the same thing will apply to us.
How can the Saudis stand up to the Americans?
It's so simple, because it is they did not. They say we are open, we are needed to cooperate together. Send your investigators. Qadi is willing to meet them. The government did not stop Qadi from meeting any investigators. Qadi announced that he's willing to open his books to check with any investigators, of course, with the president of his government. This is the normal practice.
Is this becoming a point of contention?
It could become. It depends on the Americans' reactions. If the Americans insist on freezing this man's assets or that man's assets without providing proofs, that could be a point of difference between us and the Americans. It could grow to that level.
And what would happen then?
You see, I'm very pessimistic in the way relation would develop between us and America. Our back is to the wall. We cannot surrender more of Palestine. Actually, we have surrendered all of Palestine. I mean, we see even the state of Israel as Palestine, and we have surrendered that. And now they want us to surrender the West Bank and leave just small pocket holes for the Palestinian people to live in. We cannot accept that, and we are not going to accept that. We did not accept it in Camp David, last Camp David, and we will not accept it in the future. So what more can we give? The Americans now have to do something, have to change, not us. Because really, as I told you, our back to the walls. It seems to me that the Americans are not willing, are not interested in changing their position. Some right-wing people would say in America, if we compromise on the issue of Palestine, we would look as if we are giving in to a man in a cave in Afghanistan who dictates to us. So if Osama bin Laden or Fidel Castro or anybody else says Palestine is a just cause, that does not mean Palestine is not a just cause. So we cannot blame the Palestinians for getting good wars from bin Laden or from Castro or from somebody whom the Americans do not like. So I'm pessimistic in the relation to develop between Saudi Arabia and America, because the Americans are not being careful enough.
What could happen? What is the worst that could happen?
America will not continue to be the most preferred nation in the relation with Saudi Arabia. No, I'm against the idea of turning the good relation we had in the past into an antagonistic, an enemy relation, hostile relation. No, I don't want to have a hostile relation with America. But in the same time, we shouldn't continue in treating America as the most favored nation. The world is open to us. We can work with you guys in India, with the Japanese, with the Koreans, with the British, with the... we just put our interest up front.
Is it you saying it, or is it your regime also thinking that way?
I think my government is, as Prince Abdullah put it in a letter which was disclosed, we are at a crossroad. And that was before the 11th of September. We are at a crossroads, and each nation has to see its interests. So what I'm saying is what is my reading of the situation. America had been it was the favored nation in economy, in business, in education with Saudi Arabia. This has been the case since the 50s. Maybe we should not continue like that. But in the same time, it is very important it's very vital for our development to maintain good relationship with America, as good as possible, to get what we need in terms of education, in terms of technology, business relation. America is a big business, and for example, when we talk about Arabs' assets, where can we take Arabs' assets but to America? This is for our interest. It is not also supporting American economy. It is also supporting our economy, because there are the right interest locations or businesses in America to invest in. So what I'm saying is, we treat America as another country, and we seek our interest there, but we do not prefer it. If we have a choice between a proposal from country A or a proposal from America, if country A is better, we go to country A.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.